Welcome to AIW Empower's interview series. I'm so happy to welcome our guest today, Dr. Cristina Louk. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So let's jump right in. Can you explain and tell us about your current job today?
Yeah, so I'm a licensed mental health therapist in the state of Washington, and I'm actually working toward my hours to get licensed as a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. I specialize in ADHD with adolescents and adults and teens, and I also provide ADHD testing for people in the state of Washington. I also provide telehealth services in the state of Florida as well. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
It sounds like you have your plate full, a lot of different
I
bits
do.
around. And I would love to know as well how you got here. So could you take us back to the start
Yeah.
of your career and kind of walk us through what you did, where you went to get to this point now?
Yeah, it's been a very long journey to get to where I am right now. I have ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 9. I was a very hyperactive child. So usually girls, we get ignored when it comes to, finding out if we have ADHD, but I was the one jumping off the trees, so I was tested early on. So I always knew that ADHD was going to be a part of my path, however that is. My parents didn't want to medicate me, and so they put me into dance, which actually kind of led into this first part of my adulthood, where I actually taught ballet for decades. And so that was my first career. I always was very interested in psychology, and I always wanted to have that as a part of my life, but I didn't get to it until I was in my 40s, and I decided to go back to school, get my bachelor's, master's, and my PhD, and now I'm kind of embarking in that second part of my life, which I think is really important to really emphasize that it's never too late to ask yourself that question: what do I want to be when I grow up? Because when I was, in my 20s, I wanted to be a dance teacher and own my own studio. That changed. When I was 40, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. Now, when I'm 60, who knows? I might ask myself that question again and be on my third journey. So that's my how I got here into this kind of second chapter of my adulthood
I love the
in
way that
clinical psychology.
I love the way you put that, having different journeys in different parts of your life, and you might have another one when
Yeah.
you're 60. I'm very curious how you found you found the change from dance teacher into going into psychology, because you went from creative to very intellectual, academic.
Yeah, I've always been very involved with both sides of my brain. Science has always been a base for everything that I've always done. And I think that's why I liked ballet so much, because I saw the physics and science behind it. So it made sense to me, and I taught through the science. So that made me a very kind of unique and innovative teacher. And I always included psychology. If you look back at some of my dances and the shows that I put on, there was always a psychological edge to it. There was always something that was going on in terms of, for example, I'll give you an example. I wrote a show that was based on Alice in Wonderland. The Alice in Wonderland that I did was based in a mental institution where it was trying to find your way through mental health. This was before I became a psychologist. So it was always a part of my interest, and I always added it in and was able to use kind of both sides of my brain.
That's so interesting. I'm sure they must have been a hit. People
Yeah,
getting,
the kids loved it. They loved having these complex characters to play, because in ballet it's very romance and it's pretty, and sometimes the acting is the most important part of the story, and it's not so much the dance. And so my
Mhm.
dancers always loved being able to exercise that acting muscle and include that into their training.
That's cool. And because you were having that kind of the intertwining of both your interests for a long time, do you know what was that clinching moment where you thought, okay, I have to make the switch?
Yeah. As I was getting older, I had this feeling inside me that it was time to pass the torch. There was new choreographers. there's new blood coming into the dance world. And I thought that it was kind of maybe a little arrogant that I was still trying to hold on. And it's time to let some new artistry come through. And for me, it was just time. It was just time for me to come through. My daughter who was also a dancer, she was kind of coming up into that age. She's not following this career path now, but that kind of also was an inspiration. How do I step back to let her generation step forward? And this was the way I felt that was the best move for me.
That's some really great insight into not just self-awareness, but what's going on around you and
Yeah.
how to take a step. It can be easy to make that kind of decision.
It was the decision in itself was a journey, because you have to come to an acceptance where I've done all I could. And oftentimes I see people hold on for, I didn't give enough, or they're holding on for something that's never going to really, come to fruition for them. And yet they still hold on. Yeah. Gotta learn to let go.
I'm sure it's learning to let go. You almost have to learn it sometimes in different times in your life, depending on what it is you're letting go. It's a big endeavor.
It is, and so many aspects of your life. And here's another example. So my daughter, who I was just speaking of, she's an adult. And when she was in that process of, moving away from home, that there's that another identity where here I am, me and my husband, we're like, our identity is parent. We are here to parent, and yet we had to go through that transition of having, adult child that lives somewhere else and having to go through that. So what I want to be when I grow up, I wanted to be a parent. Now I'm having to ask myself that second question. Now what? Right? So in all aspects of your life, you're constantly having to reinvent yourself.
Right.
You got to be ready to do it, because it might not be your choice. It might be a kid saying, I want to move away, it's time.
That's true.
And yeah,
I'd love to go back again early in your career. Are you able to pinpoint any one mistake or some mistake that you've made that you can look back upon now and identify?
oh, I guess so. This one's a hard one. So a mistake that I could identify as being, give me some more clarity behind that in terms of personal, or are we talking about career, or is it either or?
It could be either or, but something that may have impacted your career, or did your career impact your work or your family, or was it just career impacting career, family impacting your decisions in terms of your career, but that you see as perhaps was a mistake? Doesn't mean that you regret it, but something that you have gone through.
This one's going to be, this is kind of hard to admit, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. I think that I stayed too long as a dance teacher. I think that was my mistake. I think I should have left earlier. I think that my time was better served in the position that I hold now. And the reason I say this is kind of a selfless reason. We're coming into this time of incredible mental illness, and our mental health is such a crisis. And we are so low on mental health therapists, psychologists. There's just not enough. I think the biggest mistake that I can kind of pinpoint in my career was that I was a little too selfish, and I didn't want to let go of the glory of, running a dance competition team. There's highs and lows, it's this wonderful world to be in, and I didn't want to leave it. And I think that I wish I would have maybe 5 years earlier. So I could have given 5 more years in this, just because, but we didn't see the pandemic coming. We didn't see that this was going to be so impactful. But if I would have had the foresight to have maybe transitioned 5 years earlier, there was no reason for me to stay those last 5 years. It was really for me, it was my vanity project of wanting to put more choreography out there into the world. So I think that would have been, and I'll admit that I think I should have left earlier.
And do you see having to make that decision as one of the biggest challenges that you've had in your career?
Yeah. I held on. I loved it. Dance was an identity, and I didn't want to give up that identity. And so that was really challenging. And so that was hard for me to let go.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine just having to face that reinvention, like you mentioned.
Mm, yeah. And it was hard at first because I didn't go right into therapy. I went in from being, a studio owner, dance competition coach, from a certain level to student, because I went into school.
Right.
And that was a hard transition. However, another amazing thing that happened was being a student at 40 gave me the ability to now have a new mindset. Now that I already am through school, I still call myself a student. I'm not going to let that is an identity I'll hold,
Mm-hmm.
because we should always be a student of something. Yes, I have all these degrees, but I am still seeking new knowledge. I'm still wanting to learn. And so that was hard to go to from having that life to student, but so great because I love being a student. So one identity I won't give up.
I think that's smart, like the continuous learning,
Yeah.
lifelong learning, it could be so important. Along the same lines, what weakness do you have that you find has impacted your career in a good or a bad way?
So this is going to go back into my ADHD. And so I tell people that have ADHD that it's a superpower. I really lean into my strengths, but I've also spent, several decades knowing that I've had ADHD and learning how to work with all my strengths and my weaknesses and learning how to hone those and move those into my strengths. But the one weakness that my ADHD has given me, which is the hardest for me to manage, is the hyperactivity component. I'm restless. I'm always moving. I'm constantly going, which can be really problematic when I'm in a huge meeting and I need to be real still. I have to do a lot of things to be constantly aware of what I'm doing. I always have like little crystals and stones in my pocket, so I have something in my hands. So I have to use tools, but that's that one weakness where people see that and they don't go, oh, ADHD, we're struggling with hyperactivity. They don't see that. They think, what's wrong with her? Why can't she sit still? And so that's been the hardest one because I don't want to go up to someone and say, hi, I have ADHD. I have hyperactivity. I'm going to be a little fidgety. I don't want to do that, right? Because you lose your credibility. So that's the one weakness that I have that is just, I do my best. I do my best at trying to work with it, but it's staying.
Do you find there's more societal awareness now about those kinds of things where people are not as judgmental, or do you find it's a bit of a slow go?
Much better. It's much better. When I was a child, I was diagnosed in 1980. And so that was a time when they didn't even know very much about ADHD. And there was a lot of bias. And in the 80s, a lot of bias, in the 90s, even in the early 2000s, a lot of bias when it comes to ADHD. I never hid it from people. I have been the person that would always be like so proud of my ADHD. I would tell people, not a problem. But then I had other ADHDers who'd be like, don't say anything. People are going to think, there's something wrong. So yeah, it's so much better now. Generation Z, bless their little souls, because they're coming up really making us aware that mental illness is a thing and have more open conversations about it. So it's getting better, but it's been tricky. It has been tricky.
So would you say that perhaps having ADHD has been a part of your life that, could have been more of a challenge, but ended up being also more of a blessing that, maybe came by surprise later on to realize that it's actually propelling you in some positive ways?
I never approached it negatively. I always kind of saw it as something that I have and it makes me special. And I don't know if people with ADHD are inherently resilient, which is something I didn't know until later on. But now looking back, of course, I was always very resilient. And so I always kind of took it as a badge of honor because I was never in I could keep up. I was just like everyone else. Why would you hold me back? And so for me, it never was problematic. Did I answer your question? I kind of felt like I went off on a little tangent.
Yeah,
Did I
absolutely.
answer? Okay. I
Absolutely.
tend to do that too. I just kind of go down a different avenue.
Sometimes you get different responses. Something opens a new door, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, has there been a setback in your life that you later realized was more of a window opening than a door closing?
Yeah, when I was right out of high school, I did go into college right away. And with my ADHD, I struggled because it was a brick and mortar school.
Mm.
And I had a hard time focusing. So I wasn't successful the first go around. That door closing opened the door for me to then, pursue choreography, owning my own studio, and really push that dance aspect of it. And I'm glad, because what I was going to school for before, I don't know what I was an English major. I don't know what I would have done. It was probably not the smartest thing for me to do at the time. So that door closing was great. It propelled me into this. And over those years, school became available online. I could now go to college virtually. So for the ADHDer who could do that and actually work with an online, amazing. So that door closing allowed the time to pass for technology to finally catch up to where I could go to school and be highly successful in a different modality. So that would probably be the biggest door that closed, that offered the biggest, potential outcome that I saw in my life.
And something I had an interview with a different lady who also works with people with neurodivergence. And we had the conversation, and it's a question that I also have for you is the brick and mortar schools, I guess now it's been many, many decades of the same type of learning being implemented in the school systems.
Mhm.
Do you see that hopefully evolving into something more inclusive, or do you think it's still, little by little? And I know it depends on where people live around the globe. However, in your area, how do you see that, having been also back to university virtually just recently?
Yeah, it's getting better. It really is spotty throughout the country. I'm in the Seattle area, which is very progressive in terms of neurodivergence. There is schools here that are really great for the neurodivergent kid, which I wish that would have been around, when I was younger. I wish there was more push for that nationwide and across the globe, because we're losing a lot of kids. There's kids that get to college, can't do the brick and mortar, they just quit, and then they don't come back. I was able to come back because I have a really strong work ethic. I'm really motivated. I'm really self-aware. I have all these things that other people might not have, and they might just give up. My hyperactivity saved me because I'm constantly going, right? So every time that something happened to me, I bounce right back up because I have all this energy and I have to do something. Somebody with inattentive ADHD might not bounce back up, and that might just be it for them. So we do need more awareness. It's getting better. It is getting better, but we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to flip it back now to the positive side of your career. What do you find has been your biggest success factor?
My family. My family's been my biggest success factor. At the end of the day, when I was a little kid, I was like, what do I want to be when I grow up? I wanted my family. I wanted to have, that, having a wonderful marriage, having some children, and I was able to achieve that. So that is the biggest success in my life. And I'm so happy to have my family. I have a son, a daughter, a husband, 3 dogs, a cat. Couldn't ask for anything better.
Oh, lovely. A really full family.
I do, yes.
And, you know, throughout your career, you've made changes. Aside from going to school and leaving a full career, what sacrifices have you had to make throughout your career path? And looking back now, do you find that they were worth it?
Yeah. Huge sacrifices, especially in terms of time away from my family.
Mhm.
When I was going to school for my PhD, I had to do several internships. My internships weren't paid, but I needed to make money. So I had to work a full-time job and a full-time, part-time to full-time internship, and go to school full-time, and find time for my family. I always tell the story of when the pandemic happened, that the pandemic, although it was a horrible thing, I was able to breathe. And the reason was I was working 7 days a week, 4 10-hour days at my job, and 3 10-hour days at my internship. And I didn't have a day off. And I was about 7 or 8 months in. And I was supposed to do this for 15 months. And I was about 7 or 8 months in, pandemic hit, and I was forced to stay home for 2 weeks, and I didn't realize how exhausted I was. And I knew that moment I couldn't go back. So I was able to do my job full time, but from home, and then still go and do my internship. But at least doing my job from home put me back in a home environment so I can be around if I was needed.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the biggest sacrifice. Yeah, it was tough. And I tell people, I get asked all the time, like, oh, if I do this and if I do an internship and if I work this, and I tell people, really look at, you can't. I thought I could because my hyperactivity, but at the end of the day, my well-being was really sacrificed. That was hard.
Would you have any advice for someone looking to go back to school later on in life and perhaps do something as intensive as you did?
Yeah, do it. I tell people all the time, do it. I hear, oh, I don't have the energy. I don't have the time. That's great. You don't have the energy, you don't have the time. Use that as your excuse and do nothing. You can find time, and you can do things to give yourself more energy. So it's all in the will and want. Do you want to do it? If you want to do it, we can find a way to do it. But if you're going to come with a whole bunch of excuses, I can go one by one and show you how that excuse isn't going to work. And so then once we get rid of all those excuses, what's left? Well, it's time to try. So if you think you can't do it, you can. You just need to have some cheerleaders, encouraging you and helping coach you through it, because it's scary. So scary, especially when we're later on in life. It's scary to change and make a transition.
Especially once you've been out of the study mode for such a long time. Because I look at it myself and I think, oh my God, it's been so long since I've been in study mode. I don't even know how I could switch back. How did you flip on that study mode switch once you started on your first day?
It was easy for me because with my ADHD, the way I learn is through video and auditory. My reading comprehension has not been that great. So give me a textbook. Yeah, that's not going to way I'm going to learn. But by listening, I can learn a lot. Well, I listen to podcasts. I watch documentaries. So really, I've been in the learning mode this whole time. I just need to now make it intentional and focus it on a subject. What's been really great is there's now a ton of video, audio, different methods of getting that information in. So that's how I transitioned. I just transitioned from watching a documentary for fun into a documentary that was specific to a topic. And so when people say, how can I don't know, I haven't studied for so long. We all have. In fact, you could probably find something you did yesterday that was, learning, that was, getting you into that mode of accepting new knowledge. So that's how I did it.
That's a really nice way to put it, because I think, right, we always think about study mode and going back to having to spend 4 hours after work or what you did or after classes, studying continuously, waking up the next morning, back into the books and nonstop. And yes, it was draining, but when you're younger, it's not as taxing. So I think it is absolutely what people have in mind. It's definitely what I have in mind. And not really defining studying as looking at things that interest you.
Yeah. For the current mode and the environment in the education system, we are really expanding how we're teaching things. So gone are the days of here is this real thick textbook and you're going to read chapter upon chapter upon chapter. That's still there because there's people that really learn great that way. But now teachers are offering audiobooks, videos, all these different modalities. And for me, I looked at what the topics were, and then I would go out and find, TED Talks and speakers and interviews. So I was able to learn all that stuff a different way. So it's very doable.
It's interesting that you went out and explored additionally to find other ways that work for you. That's really fantastic. And I'm sure it could give people a lot of ideas about what they can do to enhance their own. I'd love now
Yeah.
to switch gears once more. Let's look into the future.
Okay.
Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, career-wise?
So still working. I do not have any plans to retire. I know that sounds incredibly strange, but I don't want to. I want to be very productive until I'm 100 years old. I want to be one of those 99-year-old women getting up, putting on a suit, going to work. Because to me, I love what I do. And so I don't ever want to see myself retire. I would like my private practice to be thriving, where I have space to help fellow ADHDers, minimize their struggles and maximize their strengths. I would like to continue being an educator. I love being in that learning environment. So I would love to land a position on a faculty at a university where I can continue to be in that environment. I love sharing knowledge with other people. And finding time to be with just, my family. I want to have that nice, well-rounded, but I really do want to continue to work and continue to give back. And eventually maybe even write. I do enjoy writing. Coming off of a PhD and writing a dissertation, I'm still a little burned out on writing, but I do want to get back to it because I enjoy it.
Given your many goals and your amazing goals and everything that you've done, how do you create motivation for yourself on the days that you find yourself that you are either really tired or a bit burnt out, or it's just not your day?
So I really lean into guided meditation, and that really helps me to focus. Being that I have ADHD, I can't sit in silence. When I sit in silence, I'm doing a million other things in my head. So even if I can't just find that peace. So guided meditations, I go to YouTube. There's a ton of great artists on YouTube that just have these wonderful 10-minute guided meditations. And it helps to center me. A good analogy that I use is a snow globe. When we're stressed out, we're really feeling not ourselves. It's like a snow globe that's all shooken up and you can't see what's inside. You do some meditation, the snow falls and you can see the image inside. So for me, when I spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes doing a nice guided meditation, my mind settles. And then those negative thoughts that might have popped in my head, they fall out of my head. And then I'm able to see with the little image of the snow globe and go, oh yeah, I need to do that today. And then it helps me focus. And there's days when I do 3, 4, 5 meditations a day. Not gonna lie, there's some days that really take that extra work. But I try to start my day with one, just to help keep me focused.
I love that analogy. It's very vivid imagery, and I can see it as you're explaining it. So given that you've just gone through this whole new education, and that you're in the field now, you're working, what do you feel is the best educational preparation for your specific career now?
Rephrase that. I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking.
If someone were to come to you and ask you, how do I best prepare my education? I want to do what you do. How is the best way to start, and what are my steps?
Yeah, so what I did, this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but this is what I did. So when I was thinking, this is kind of like, I want to do this, how do I know that this is where I want to go? I went to, I think it was Coursera or Harvard X. It was one of those online where you kind of audit little programs. And there's a lot of psychology courses. And I thought, what population scares me the most? And when I say scares me, it's like I never think I could help. Like it would be so hard to help them. Like I would not have the capacity. Let's start with the hardest. So I took like 3 little courses on individuals with intellectual disability. And so I'm like, took these 3 courses and I'm like, this is really interesting. I think I like these people. I think I'm going to get a job working with these folks. And this right when I started school, still not knowing if this is what I want to do, but I just started. So I got a job with working with individuals with intellectual disability. And it just so happened I was running a behavioral group, which was very much in line with what I wanted to do. The population that I thought was going to scare me the most ended up being the population I fell in love with the most. And I ended up spending 5 years working with this population. I wrote my dissertation on how to create more opportunities of happiness for them. And yeah, so take a class, a free class, of course. You might be interested in psychology. Great, go find a course in one of the populations. Maybe you think maybe drug addiction. So take a little course to see if that would interest you. Maybe it's schizophrenia. Great, take a little course. Just dip your toe in. And then maybe if you dip your toe in, the water's kind of warm, then stick your whole foot in like I did. And then I just dove right in. And who would have thought that that little question, like, what population do I not think I can serve? Took me down this path, and it led me to the most amazing population. I don't work with them now, but gosh, it was great. What a great group of people.
That's a really interesting way of finding your niche, because I would suppose most people would wait until they get into university and into learning about in psychology and abnormal psychology and whatnot, and going into those courses. If you don't know it, it's okay, but I thought I'd put this out to you. Based on the niche population that you would like to work with, if you choose a niche, would you then suggest people look into which universities would be best to learn about that? Or is it more so where you go and do your oh my goodness, cooperative,
like your undergraduate work?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I think that you should, not necessarily your niche yet. I think you need to know your fundamentals. And I'll explain what I mean by this. When I was thinking about what school I was going to, remember, I'm dipping my toe in and I'm watching all these things. One thing that really turned me off with psychology was the pathologizing. You have something wrong with you, so let me find out what was wrong with you. Hugely turned off. And then I ran into the work of Abraham Maslow, which is humanistic psychology, which is flips it. Let's look at everything that's good with you. How can we get you to your topmost self-actualize? And that was when I had this aha moment where I'm like, oh, there's my focus. So I looked for a school that taught humanistic psychology. And so that to me was the most important thing. Where a lot of other people I have friends that go to, they have more of a behaviorist outlook, where it's not, what's wrong with you, or let's get you to the next thing. They look at it like, what behaviors do you want to change? Well, that's great. There's schools for that. So that's kind of what you want to look at. What is the fundamental? Do you want to look at, behaviors? Do you want to look at how to make your best self? Or do you want to maybe work with deeper mental illness? That would be a different thing. So I think once you find the bucket that you fit in, then once you're in there, you can really find your niche. I fell in love with folks with intellectual disability. Well, that's that neurodevelopmental, which also includes ADHD. So I kind of found my home, right? And so I grabbed, everything I can learn about ADHD, intellectual disability, autism, and that's how I niched underneath the umbrella of humanistic psychology, where I'm taking my people to their best place.
That's really important, and I'm happy that you said it, because it's something that I've not heard someone say, that a certain school will teach different kinds. I've heard of professors being a bit more biased towards certain philosophies of psychology, or certain professors from way back, and align themselves with, say, Freud, or some other prominent psychologist and their teachings. However, learning about it before and making your mind up for yourself, as opposed to being influenced by your professors who you're there to learn from and are an authority figure in a sense, is a really good piece of advice that people can actually go in with their eyes open.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at those fundamentals, because I know I would not have been happy if I went to a school that focused on behaviors, because that didn't fit. I was already being triggered by what I was seeing about the pathologizing, I don't think I would have been happy. So I'm really happy that that played out for me in the way that it did.
And so far in your career, have you found that there are any social obligations alongside with your job, or do you see any coming in the future?
Social obligations, define what you mean by that. Are we
Are
looking for stuff
there,
I do that outside of my job?
yeah, is there any kind of expectation that you network with others in your field, that you go
Oh,
in?
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, I do. I do a lot of work outside of my private practice that betters the field and helps other clinicians. So I donate time at my local chapter for licensed mental health clinicians. I do work on the board of directors for them. I also work on their education committee. And then there's another organization that is energy psychology, and I also serve on their education committee. So I do really try to give back to those that support people in my field. And so I do a lot of extra work with those organizations.
So you have your plate even more full now,
Yeah.
but in a positive way, in a positive way. And, you know, I guess it may depend on each individual's personality, but is it something that you encourage for people who definitely do want to make an impact and help progress things in the field?
Yeah, I always encourage new clinicians that are coming in to kind of pick how they're going to, we all need to give back. Pick how you're going to give back. You don't have to do everything, but pick one. For me, I've spent, when I was in my dance career, I was on boards for acting companies. You know, that was kind of the level of how I always have been giving back. And so for me, that was natural. I have colleagues that do pro bono work. That's how they give back. That's great. You know, we need to do something so we don't just become, you know, people that are just wanting the money, right? Trying to like absorb. We need to also be able to put our knowledge back into what we're doing. So yeah, I encourage anybody coming into this field, just pick what it is. And that's what you do. I have other colleagues that will donate time for you know, natural disasters. And so they might be going to do energy work, tapping for somebody who's maybe in Hawaii during some of those disasters, or, you know, with what's going on overseas, there's a lot of people that need to go over there and help. So however you give back, but do it. It makes you feel good. It's that pro-social behavior. So part of my dissertation was on how do we promote happiness. One thing that promotes happiness, like real happiness in you, is pro-social behaviors, giving back. So why not, right? If you give back, you're receiving joy. So let's do it.
That is a fantastic conclusion, I think, to your dissertation. And seems like the field is very altruistic as a whole, or perhaps in your area.
Yeah.
How else would you describe the industry's culture in your experience?
It's changing for the better, but we still have a little bit of ways to go. So it depends on, I think, where you are in the world, and the different politics still play, but it is getting better. In Seattle, we're very progressive. And so most therapists here, you know, we tend to have more openness in terms of seeing all types of people, which is fabulous. There's still little parts of the country that it's still not as where it needs to be, but we're a work in progress, just like every other field. We're a work in progress, but we are as a unit trying to raise ourselves up, right?
And are there any current issues or upcoming trends that anyone who's interested in going into this field that they should be aware of?
Yeah. So coming into this field, a lot of people come in wanting to, you know, I want to work with trauma. That's great. Know what kind of trauma you want to work with. Right now, there is a ton of trauma that needs to be worked with the youth. They came out of the pandemic not doing too well. So we need a lot of people working with children. So there's a little bit of a lapse there. We need more. We need a lot more people in working with the various immigration groups that are coming in. They're coming in with such significant trauma. So we need a lot more people that speak various languages, that can really hit the ground running with some of these folks that are, coming into this country, wanting this better life, that are stuck with so much trauma that got them here. So I think that would be a really great place for people to start, as they're coming in.
And do you foresee, or has there been conversations about the development of mental health issues as we go on, even though the world has quote unquote gone back to normal? It's not. This is a new normal,
No,
and
yeah.
we're not behaving the same way that we did 5 years ago. Has there been conversation on the potential impacts of this new normal?
Yes. The field is very aware of our current situation, and we are aware that it's not good. They say that, things are looking up. It's not looking up. People are suffering and struggling. Right now, most of the clinicians that are out there are struggling too. They are maxed out. They can't take any more clients, and they're burning out. And so we have people that are leaving the field because they can't take this big influx. We are trying to come up with some systems to better work. We're very focused on cultural competency to help us work with all these different cultures coming in. But it's a process and a slow progress, and we need more people in the field. We really do.
And my next question was going to be, given your observations and the people that you've known in the field, what is typically the main reason that people leave these careers?
I'm going to be very honest, and this is a hard lesson a lot of us had to learn. People come into this field and they think, I'm just going to take insurance and it's going to be great, and I'm going to have all these insurance clients and I'll be able to, have this wonderful career. Insurances aren't paying enough to pay our student loans. So these I don't take insurance, but for those that do take insurance, they can't at 40 hours, 50, 6, how many clients can you see a week? They say 20 is full time. So these poor clinicians are trying to work so much, trying to make money to pay their student loans, to pay these high rents, and insurance isn't paying enough. And then some insurances will turn around and say, oh, that client wasn't sick, give me my money back. And then these poor clinicians are like, I now owe $5,000 and I can't pay it. And so clinicians quit. So there's a movement for a lot of clinicians to not take insurance and go cash pay only. And that's what I've done. And the only reason I did it is I want longevity. Remember, I want to still do this till I'm 99. I can't at 51 years old see 30 clients a week. I need to be able to see enough to pay my rent, feed me, and pay my student loan. So for me, that's a lot of us are doing it that way. There's people in my field that look at us like we're money hungry. No, we just want to pay our bills, and not get burned out. So we need insurances to wake up. Pay us a living wage. Now, if they would pay us a living wage, great. But they don't. And they contract us to where we're not even allowed to talk about what each insurance pays. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, I can't go up to somebody and say, how much is, that insurance paying you? I can't say, right? So they're creating this environment where there's no competition if we can't talk openly. So, insurances need to change. More people would stay in the field, I think, if they were able to take insurance and make money enough to pay their bills and work reasonable hours.
It's a unique challenge for the type of environment that we're living in now.
Very much.
Yeah. So now, as opposed to leaving, from the people that you've known, that you've worked with, that you've gotten to know in the field, if you could kind of look at them as a whole, what personal attributes would you say factor into their success?
I've been so blessed with working with so many amazing clinicians, just the ability to be so empathetic and non-judgmental and really be able to hold space for really hard stuff. What great qualities. I did my internship at a cancer center where, we helped people through all stages of cancer, from surviving, woohoo, to, not. And the people that I worked with there, they held space for people going through the most difficult, for the person and their family, the most difficult thing, and with such poise, and such grace. And I thought, wow, these are amazing people to be able to be there for, not walk away. This is too hard. I can't help you with this, but to sit there and just let them cry and mourn and grieve. Powerful. Yeah, really powerful. So any kind of crisis, I know that, give me a good clinician to sit with me, right? And just hold that space. Amazing, amazing quality.
And this is something, is this something you feel can be learned, that you can kind of progress into holding that kind of space for people, just for listeners to think, maybe, well, I'm not that person now, but doesn't mean that you cannot become that person. Yeah.
Right. There's a good deal of us that come into this field having it naturally, right? Therapy for me was easy. I was providing it to all my friends, kind of thing. That's how I got in. I had no trouble holding that kind of space. Yes, I think you can learn it. I think that's what having all of those internships and having all, when we go through our clinical training, we go and we work with a lot of different people, and we have various rotations. And the reason is to see, well, where are you going to fit? But another reason why I think that is happening is to give you this, bigger experience. Now, I've worked with people that have had experiences like that at the Cancer Partnership, that they were able to do it for the year that came out. And they're like, I don't want that. I would rather do this, but they could do that. They were there. I think that with the right supervision, right, the right people helping you, we work through that. We use that time to kind of work through that own stuff. I remember when I was going through that internship, I would go to my supervisor, and I'd process. And that helped me learn how to do it. Because even though I was a natural at it, I still had to learn a little bit on how to deal with death. And I had that structured supervision. So yes, if you have it naturally, this is going to be easy for you. If you don't, you're going to be able to learn it. And that is why we have so much training. So, there's a reason for that. So don't feel like you're going to be thrown out in the field and not know if you could do it. You're going to be handheld for many years and then you're going to be ready.
And how did you find the training on separating your emotions of your clients, what you feel about your clients, what they're going through, and then after that session is done, going back to you and what you're going through in your life?
Right. I don't know if we ever completely compartmentalize and separate. My empathy and my being there for my clients doesn't end when the session ends. I think about them through my day. I send them good energy. If I have a client that might be going to an interview the next day I might be going, oh, good luck, good luck, good luck. So I don't think it ends. I think when you're dealing with trauma, we learn again through that clinical training how to compartmentalize that, how not to hold that within us, just to hold the space for the person. So we're not taking that with us, but the joy of that person and the therapeutic relationship and the good feelings that we have for the client, that stuff stays. And I think that's the good stuff, right? That's where I enjoy my job. But the compartmentalizing of the trauma, we learn how to do that. Now, I have ADHD, and one of the strengths of ADHD is we tend to compartmentalize things because we tend to do better on emergencies. We can shut our whole life down and deal with the emergency. That's just how our ADHD brain works. And then we can shift back. So for me, it was natural. I can easily compartmentalize that. And the big trauma was easier for me to kind of deal with.
I think it's really lovely that you hold the joy, that you keep that part of your clients and, think about them in that way. I think it's really lovely.
Yeah.
Could you explain, if it's possible, what a typical workday or work week is like for you?
Yeah. So I have I I do a couple of things. So I have my private practice. I have my private practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I see clients, 5 to 6 clients each day. I do one day at home at telehealth, and then I rent a space for 2 days a week. My Thursday, Friday, I spend in my postdoc internship. So I'm in another agency where I'm doing assessments with children. Both places I'm working with ADHD. I focused my whole career, my private practice on everybody like 12 and up, right? ADHD 12 and up. I never had a lot of experience with little kids. So my internship, my postdoc internship, I'm really focusing on working with everyone under the age of 12. Because I can teach and dance, but the psychology thing is new. And so I wanted to have somebody that can kind of coach me through it and get me comfortable with it. So that's my week. I'm working 5 days a week and I'm seeing clients all day, 2 different agencies and 2 different adults and little kids, all with ADHD or autism or learning disabilities.
Have you found it beneficial to have now the dichotomy in the clients that you see, given now that you have that internship with younger children?
Yeah, I really like the switch. I like being able to kind of, have the second thing I'm doing. It really gives me a broader fabric kind of learning that I'm doing with ADHD. We talked earlier about having that, that niche, and that my ADHD is the niche, but there's so many other areas within there that I want to be very competent and skilled. And so I'm trying to find every little crevice so I can become that expert in it. So at the end of the day, I can, be the resource. Whether you're 6 or 60 and have ADHD, come to me and I'll be able to help.
What do you like the most about your work if you had to choose one thing?
I need to turn this heater off because I got warm. Okay, sorry about that. What was that question again?
What do you like most about your work if you had to choose just one thing?
It constantly changes. I never have the same day twice. And I need that with my ADHD. I need new and novel stimuli to engage my brain. That is ADHD in a nutshell. Every day is different. Every client will come with something new. I might be giving similar interventions or similar kind of advice, but it's different in how that interaction is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I absolutely love about it. I'm never bored. It's always changing.
That's fun. That's fun.
Very much.
Now, I know that you want to do this work until you're 99, but let's imagine that you decide to leave this field. What would be the most likely thing that will drive you away?
Oh, what am I going to do when I'm 60? Right? That's the third thing. What could pull me from this? That is such a great question. I don't know. My whole life has been really with this dichotomy of dance and psychology. I don't know what that third thing would be unless it would be really bringing them both together in some way. I do love, part of me does miss that artistic, a piece of dance where I was able to create. So maybe that third thing would be finding a place in psychology to create something new, whatever that is. So maybe my next thing would be in terms of creating a new modality or starting something new and different to help people with ADHD. I think that would be my next career, my third. What do I want to be when I grow up?
That sounds really interesting. I think, well, let's stay tuned to see what you do
Right.
with that. That sounds really fun. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Louk, for joining me today and providing really valuable information for everyone. Before I let you go, though, I would love to give you the floor. If you could give one or more pieces of advice for anyone interested in doing what you do. And also, before you go, I would love for you to give us a little bit about your private practice and how people can contact you and your availabilities.
Yeah. So my biggest advice for anybody out there is you can do it. Don't be afraid. find somebody to be a cheerleader for you that will coach you through and just encourage you. You can be whoever you want to be. And it's never too late to start again. You know, ask yourself that question. What do I want to be when I grow up? That could be the next 10 years. I am 51 years old and I'll ask that question again. What do I want to be when I grow up, right? So don't be afraid to ask the question, and just have fun. Have fun with the journey. That's all it is. There's no destination in life. It's all a journey. So get on a journey and enjoy the ride. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And I'm located in the state of Washington in Kirkland. My private practice is Peace Humanistic Therapy, and that's Peace, P-E-A-C-E, Humanistic Therapy. I offer telehealth in the state of Washington and in the state of Florida, and I'm hoping to have registration in the state of South Carolina here in the next couple of weeks. I offer individual psychotherapy for adolescents, teens, and adults. I offer ADHD-focused couple counseling, where if one of the members of the couple have ADHD or both, and ADHD is getting in the way, I offer counseling for that. I have adult and teen ADHD testing. It's a stripped down, bare bones ADHD testing. We're going to get you in and out, no wait list. And I also offer hypnotherapy specifically for the ADHDer. So if you think that I have ADHD and I can't get hypnotized, I do it in a way to really engage your subconscious, and we can work that way too. So yeah, you can email me. I have availability. As I said, I'm accepting new clients.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Louk.
Yeah, well, thank you.